Welcome to the Tower Yoga Podcast, where we dive deep into the heart of yoga and community. Come along with us as we explore the transformative power of yoga, share insights, and inspire one another on this journey of life. I'm Kellee Williams, and I'm your host and the co-founder of Tower Yoga. Thank you for joining our yoga community. Well, hello and welcome into another episode of the Tower Yoga Podcast. Today, I am so super excited to have on my friend and newest addition to the team, or re-addition to the team, Mariah Miller. Welcome to the podcast.
Hi, I am so excited to be here and excited to come back with Tower Yoga.
Yeah, it's been so cool. So Mariah and I met several years ago. I know it was pre-pandemic.
2018.
Yeah, cool. And I feel like we are definitely in some kind of soul pod situation. We had like this instant connection, feeling of sisterhood really quickly. And I really like when that happens. The slow build is always cool too in any kind of friendship or partnership, but the immediacy of connection is so cool and kind of rare actually too when you meet people like that. So excited. Right away, we had a lot of parallel interests and practices, and we could just talk for a million billion hours. We won't do that today in this podcast episode, but how about, Mariah? Let's get to you right away and a little bit of your like personal history and journey with both yoga and sound.
Awesome. Yeah, let's get into it. Actually, my first yoga class I ever took, I was living in New York City and I was training for the New York Marathon, and I was having sciatic nerve issues because I wasn't stretching enough. And so my friend was like, "You should go to this yoga class. You're very spiritual. I think you're going to love it. And I think it will really help your running." And so I went to it. It ended up being a Bikram yoga class. And I was all the way like towards the side of the room where there's like no airflow for my first time. And it started to get hot. I didn't realize it was a hot yoga class also. And I literally wanted to die. I wanted to get out of there as fast as I could. And then the next day I had to run 18 miles, and I ended up getting really sick because I didn't rehydrate myself. And so after that, I was like, I'm never doing yoga again at that point.
Understandable.
And also, I feel at that time, I was a makeup artist and I was more into going to the gym or running outside. But then it evolved as, I got older. And when I moved out of New York City, when I moved to LA, my friend got me into core power yoga. And
Of course.
so, yeah, exactly. The militant.
Yeah. What do you mean? Yeah.
The militant. And, doing that same routine over and over again, right? But I do feel like that really built my foundation, right, of learning the techniques. And, I started feeling better, even feeling better when I was at work. And so that was kind of the beginning of my practice. I ended up moving out of LA into Oceanside with my husband. He was my boyfriend at the time. And so my practice continued. But when I went to Oceanside, it wasn't a hot yoga studio. So that was nice too. The teacher was very like descriptive in how she taught and like how these different postures are affecting your body, your nervous system. And I just loved kind of the science behind it. But I actually did not find Kundalini Yoga until I moved to Fresno. So I moved to Fresno in 2017. And one of my clients from LA introduced me to a woman here. I ended up meeting up with her at the annex, and we were talking all things spiritual. And she's like, "You really need to go to Kundalini Yoga. I just have this feeling." And um, I was supposed to meet up with her that week, and then she canceled on me. And then I was kind of too afraid to go to it at that time, so I didn't go. I took a trip with my husband to go see family. And on the way back, I had a layover in Denver, and that woman was on my flight.
No.
Yes. And she's like, "Did you go to the Kundalini Yoga class?" And I was like, "No, I didn't, but now I'm going. I'm definitely going." I felt like that was such a huge sign for me to go.
Message received.
Yeah. And so I went to my first class and had this kind of profound experience in it. And I felt the best I'd ever felt from a class. And it was kind of like what do you call it, like an accumulation of everything kind of spiritually, energetically through sound in one class for me. And I felt it was more spiritually based, like to have your eyes closed the whole time. It really made me go within. And the next day I started looking up Kundalini trainings. Like I took the one class.
Whoa.
And I was like, because I had been kind of looking for trainings even when I was, when I moved to Oceanside, and I was going to do core power, but it just, something didn't, like, I just couldn't do it. Like, and I actually had the time to do it then also. And so I found a training in LA at Wanderlust Studios. And I loved that they have music and yoga festivals, and I love that whole scene. And so I thought this would be kind of the perfect training for me. And there you go. I took my
Boom,
training,
baby.
boom, like literally 2 months later.
You know what's so interesting? Well, first, I have a couple things
Yeah.
here. The first thing is when you say the connection with sound, do you mean because of the mantra and the chanting in
Yes.
Kundalini? Okay.
Yes. And then also in Kundalini Yoga, they use the gong as your deep relaxation or your shavasana. And I
Mm-hmm.
was doing sound healing throughout this whole time, but not for like a group of people. I had like a couple of bowls, and I would do Reiki or crystal healing sessions. So I always
Okay.
had one toe in spirituality and one in beauty. And so
Mm.
I was bridging kind of the two together.
Yeah, and beauty is such a tenet of spirituality. You think about, the most ceremonious kind of cultures, and their rituals involve a lot of adorning the body and the environment and all that kind of stuff. So it's gorgeous, and we can get into that a little bit later. But okay, cool. There's another thing I just want to point out that is so awesome is that I feel like I heard that story about you training for the marathon thing, but I didn't connect the two. That's how Jameson got into yoga as well. When he
Oh,
was
really?
in Colorado, he was training for his first marathon, and he had like knee pain. And the physical therapist was like, "You should go to yoga." And he went. And the first time he went, they were like oming and stuff, and he was like, "What the heck?" But he felt really good. So he kept going, and then, it changed his life. So there's a little connection there, and I think that's so cool. And you two are like two of my favorite people. So I love that your entryway in was kind of like from a
Similar.
similar starting point. The other thing is that when Wanderlust was a traveling yoga festival, uh, he and I would assist our slacklining and acro yoga teachers. So we would go on those circuits, and we would we would teach and assist like a couple, 2 or 3 times a year, like in Hawaii and you know, Tahoe, Whistler, these kinds of places. And so that's so cool that there's like a little another
Wow. Yeah,
connection there that I didn't know about
synchronicity.
before. Mm-hmm.
Cool. I love that.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. I love that for us.
I do.
So actually, let's take it back a little bit, and I'm interested in, for anyone who isn't really familiar with sound healing, is there a way that you can kind of give a description or let people kind of in on what that is?
Yeah, I like to describe sound healing as a sonic massage for the body. And the different instruments are producing sound waves to activate the theta state in the brain, right? Where the meditative state. And so you're able to relax more, you're able to kind of see things differently, you're able to kind of reach different states of consciousness as well, and really calm your nervous system. And the nice thing about sound is that you can just lay down, you know? You don't really have to do any movement, and you can let the sound take you on a journey, right? The journey within your emotions, and it aligns your chakras, your removes blockages in the body. And I always say like sound is kind of like a laser. So anything that like we haven't been dealing with, it has a way of like going into your nervous system and bringing it up for you in a safe way. And the
Mm-hmm.
other cool thing about sound is that I feel like it's a gateway to so many other spiritual practices as well. It kind of opens your mind to different dimensions of seeing things in a new light.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more just in my own experience. And I do love that there aren't like the demands of physicality that are required in order to receive the benefits. Obviously, it's the vibrational shifts from the sound that are like doing that sort of laser work, would you
Yes,
say?
yes, exactly. I mean, it's softer than a laser, but sometimes during a sound bath, it really, does penetrate your nervous system, the vagus nerve, right, in general. And sometimes your body can shake from it because you've been holding on for so long and it's recalibrating itself. So sometimes your body might shake or you'll cough, right? And it's just really moving that energy out
Mm-hmm.
to be released.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm thinking, in utero too, like of all the senses, sound is one of the first ones. So beautiful. And I'm thinking back to when Star, my daughter, when she was little and she was going through some stuff when she was like around 4, she started humming, but like all the time. And it concerned me. So I was talking to the doctor about it, and she was like, yeah, it's like a self-soothing thing, and if there's something at home
Mhm.
that's going on right now that is a little stressful, she's doing it to soothe herself. And first of all, I was like, oh my god, but
Mhm.
I thought that's also really beautiful that we have the tool of our vocal cords to be able to soothe ourselves. And there is something about the vibration and sound that was helping her nervous system to be able to withstand whatever stress that she was going through during that time.
Yeah, it's super cool how instinctual we are at such a young age to intrinsically know that that is going to literally activate your vagus nerve to calm you. Wild.
I know. And I mean, she was 4, so she wasn't aware of like all the social etiquette of like, doing that kind of stuff. But how beautiful. I guess we couldn't all just go walk around humming. Like that would be like really weird, but but to know that like in the privacy of our home or our car or something, like we can do that.
I feel like if I could just talk in sounds sometimes because I don't have words for some of the emotions that I feel. And I think that's why I resonate with sound so much because it's a way with feeling without having a label or a word attached to it. It can just be in its own essence of what it is in that moment when you're feeling it.
Yeah, yeah, totally. So we were talking about Kundalini, and there's a lot of yogis listening to this podcast, but some people might be newer to the practice of Kundalini, and so I'm wondering if you can kind of define the style or structure, and just give some more insight into what Kundalini Yoga is.
Yeah, so Kundalini Yoga is the yoga of awareness, and it's a technology that uses breath work, movement in sequence, chanting, and sound, which is called a Kriya, and meaning action, movement. And so when you bring all of these tools or modalities together, it really takes you, like I said before, on this inner journey and really allowing yourself to even kind of get a little bit uncomfortable, especially with the chanting. If you're chanting a certain mantra, some people kind of get weirded out by it if they don't know what it means. But I always let people know what it means. And if you don't want to chant it, you don't have to chant it. And at the same time, it's really using a sound current, right? And you're using different parts of your tongue that are hitting the roof of your mouth, which is like an instrument. And so it's like you're tapping into these keys, right? Accessing different parts of your brain that might have not um, been able to be accessed before. And then that's how I feel those different thoughts of awareness and spiritual um, ascension kind of begins because you're literally using your body as an instrument to access higher thoughts of consciousness.
That's really cool, and I do love that there is the the movement, the kriya, which is more of an action. And action doesn't just have to be something, I guess, that is like a physical movement. But because at first I was thinking, well, what differentiates that from bhakti yoga? You know, like the yoga of devotion and singing, like in kirtan and that kind of thing. But it's like there might be spontaneous movement that people do during a kirtan or when they're like singing mantras and chants to uh, universal intelligence. But they're very specific
Yeah.
movements with very specific mantras for a very specific
Yeah.
amount of
Time.
time. It's all so
Yes.
intentional, and I love that about Kundalini.
Yes. When I first started, like in my training, we had to, decide what kriyas we were going to teach. And I think we had to send in like 10 different kriyas and we had to have the time sequence down, but then still fit it into an hour. And I sent my homework in and I would literally be like 20 seconds off and she would make me redo it. That's how intense the sequencing was. And I was like, really? 20 seconds? Like, that's going to make such a difference? But now, on the other side of it and being a teacher and having to be done right at like the 60 minute mark. I mean, now my timing is like impeccable, I will say. Now I don't ever go over, and I am really cautious about my timing of each sequence and how these different kriyas have been taught for thousands of years, right? In this specific order. And there's around 5,000 kriyas to be taught
Wow.
from.
That's incredible. You couldn't even one lifetime wouldn't be enough, but you could try.
Yeah.
I found Kundalini yoga, well, let's see, stars 13. So 13, 14 years ago when I was pregnant. And I think I got oh my God, this is going to date me, but I don't care. I'm 180. So I got a DVD from Gurmukh that was like a prenatal one.
Mhm.
And it was so cool because like the Kriyas on that one were like 3 minutes, and then going later into learning about how like contractions can be around like 3 minutes apart from each
Yes.
other in birth. And that was so cool. And I do feel like being so devoted to that style of practice, and just the breathing and the chanting, it really helped. Being so devoted to that style of practice before I had her, and there's all kinds of other things at play too. But like my birthing experience, I think part of what made it such a beautiful and uh, enjoyable, if I can say that, like
Yeah.
process for me was really dedicating wholeheartedly to that practice. And then also, because the circumstances and the conditions of my labor allowed, I was able to drop in and remember and use those. So it's really, really cool. And I just thought that was so interesting that the the timing of the kriyas and all that kind of stuff actually align with the rhythms of nature, like the ancient rhythm of
Yeah.
birthing and beyond.
Yeah. Yes, because in I call it kind of like the warrior yoga. It really teaches you discipline. It's something that I didn't really have before. And it allowed me to really go through challenging times and kind of surf those a little bit easier, because when you're in a 3-minute posture and it's a short movement, I mean, Kundalini yoga is a short movement, breath to movement posture, and it's 3 minutes, and you're like doing something weird with your arms, and it can get challenging, and you're breathing through it, and you're like, holy shit, like I can't even do this for like 30 seconds. How am I going to get to 3 minutes, and you just go through all of this, fuckery in your mind, right, to
Yeah.
like really get through just this one posture. And I think that that really allows you to strengthen your nervous system and allow for, like, when challenging times come into your life, to be able to kind of move through them with a little bit more grace.
Totally. It is. It's like a little bit of a boot camp.
Exactly.
Different than core power style
Yes.
boot camp, but
Yes.
like a spiritual boot camp. It's so funny. I don't know why I just remembered this, but I was taking a Kundalini yoga class in Spanish one time in Peru. And we were like, you keep your eyes closed, but there was this one where it's like you kick repeatedly, like standing up,
Yes. Uh-huh.
And I remember I got kicked by someone behind me. But I just figured, like, there's the Ram Dass quote, treat everyone you meet like God in drag. And I was just like, okay, God, like, I guess I needed a swift kick in the ass, because like I literally got kicked in the ass by the chick behind me. She was mortified too.
Right.
But we just laughed and then like got back into the Kriya, and there was still like another fucking minute to go. So I was also like laughing, and it was amazing. One of my favorite memories in a
Oh,
Kundalini yoga class so
that's
far.
hilarious.
I do want to, just because it's kind of like an elephant in the room, so we don't need to spend too much energy or time on it, because I really want to focus like on the practice of it.
Mhm.
But you did mention that some of these kriyas are really, really old. But then, like the founder of Kundalini Yoga, Yogi Bhajan, and you mentioned Bikram before. So, there's these similar stories of two men channeling in these technologies or practices that are really, really powerful, but that them as the personalities got confused, maybe fell from grace in their own ways, but kind of similar stories having to do with, unsavory behaviors and these kinds of things. It's This is such a common story
Mhm.
for our lifetime of these practices coming, and then it's like, okay, how do we now, once these things come to light about behaviors that are very confused and not safe, like how do we separate like the man essentially from
The
the practice or
practice.
the technology. Yeah.
Yeah, when I first heard about the allegations, I was torn up really about it because the experience that I was having with it was so profound and life changing that I didn't know if I actually wanted to teach it anymore. And, the pandemic happened, right? And so um, I actually quit practicing for a couple of months because I just kind of had to separate myself from it. And after that couple of months, I started to not feel as balanced anymore. I felt like my emotions were more high and low. And then I started up my practice again and said, we're human, right? At the end of the day. And at that time, we looked up to these gurus as God, as like their be all is all. And I think actually these allegations really allowed ourselves to actually turn back inward and say, no, I am my own guru, right? I'm not going to let that circumstance take that practice away from me and what it can do for other people. And I know the experience that it gives me. And so that's where I'm at with it now. And I also think that now like, I personally didn't really want to wear all white. I didn't want to wear a turban on my head. I didn't really feel that was me, in its essence. Like, I mean, I love color, I love
Hmm.
to express myself, and my individuality. And I felt like that was such a separation with me in Kundalini Yoga as well. And so after these allegations came out, I found more of these teachers that had been teaching for like 20 years, 30 years are now not wearing all white. They're not wearing the turban on their head. So I feel like it kind of helped break that what structure that was kind of so rigid around it. And I think now we're developing new techniques, right, around Kundalini that we can bring into other practices.
Hmm. Yeah, I love that. Just the ability to separate like the man from the practice and hold lots of things as true at the same time. And for anyone that didn't know that in Kundalini, it was suggested that you wear a white turban or at least something to like cover your crown chakra, your head, that you would wear all white because it's less absorbent of like energy and all that kind of stuff. So, yeah. So, would you so I don't know this. That's why I'm
Mhm.
asking. Did he create those kinds of like structures within it and then like this is how you're supposed to teach and all that kind of stuff? Because the Kriyas existed before. Like
Yes.
yoga existed before. Kundalini was some like did he coin the name?
He coined
And
the name. He brought it over in 1969, and really he was forbidden to use this technology into the West, and he brought it anyways. He really used it at that time in the 60s where it was like drugs, rock and roll, and he was really getting a lot of people off of drugs at the time. And so I think that was another reason why it was so strict in its practice, because
mm,
drug addicts, right, need discipline and something strict to then move forward from. And now I feel like that is, like I said, kind of loosened, right? And the structure is not so rigid, you know? And I personally want to bring some of my own intuitive, what would I call method into the Kundalini practice that have changed my life as well. And so now that I feel
yeah.
like that has happened, because before, if you didn't practice Kundalini exactly in that sequence, in that Kriya, right, in that time, you couldn't call it Kundalini Yoga.
Oh, got it.
Yes.
So, how will you explore combining Kundalini? And I know there's sound involved, obviously, but are you bringing more sound to the class that you'll be offering at Tower Yoga?
Yes, I would like to add a little bit more of the sound healing structure at the end of the class, or maybe even the beginning, but just to have more freedom in the way that I teach, and even within the music. Okay, so the music is another key element to Kundalini Yoga. It's mostly all mantra based music, which is great because it's repetitive, right? It entrains the brain. But there's this element of where I feel bringing in kind of more modern music with the Kundalini music as well brings another dimension and a more modern take on Kundalini Yoga. And so I really want to
Mm.
bring those into the class, but very intentional, right? Based music as well, um, that represent kind of music that has also changed my life as well. Because when I was taking Kundalini, we would do dance as a meditation. And I remember thinking, like, oh, I don't dance sober, like at that time. And then it was kind of hard for me to dance to this Kundalini meditation music, right? I'm like, I can't like get down to that. I mean,
You're like, I'm not making my booty clap.
so like when I was designing, exactly, when I was designing my classes, I would search hours for the right Kundalini dance song. And then I was finally like, F it, I'm not going to do this. And then I started just adding maybe like one different song that made me move, right? Like made me move more expressively than the Kundalini mantra music. I mean, one day I hope to create Kundalini mantra music that has beats to it, that makes it a little
Mm.
bit more modern, and even using sound healing frequencies in it.
Oh, I love that. I love that. I can't
It
wait. I'm
needs an
already excited for it.
upgrade. It needs an upgrade.
I agree. I
I
agree.
think
I
a lot of
agree.
people that take Kundalini or have been in a Kundalini class can agree to it. So it's still keeping the origin, right? I'm not taking it away, but then just bringing kind of more of a modern influence to it.
Yeah, I'm so excited. So I guess we didn't mention that. Mariah and I have facilitated and collaborated together on sound baths, and she taught Kundalini yoga for us for a little while before she had her son. And it's so amazing. But I do think that the last couple years you have grown and developed and found such a foothold in like yourself and your own practice and how you offer these kinds of things. So I am really, really excited for you to bring Kundalini and sound to the studio. It's going to be starting in June on Tuesday nights at 7 p.m. And it will be that fusion, unique practice of the Kriyas and sound, movement, music, upgraded style, hopefully. And it's so exciting. But if we bump back a little bit, how did you get into sound? Because you were saying that you were already into sound and sound healing by the time you got into like yoga and especially Kundalini yoga. So how did that come to be?
I got into sound also in New York. I was working as an esthetician and doing a ton of facials, and I was getting really burnt out. I didn't know at the time that I was an empath, and I was basically like taking on all of their energy. And one of the women that I worked with was telling me about crystals and how they can help, right? Protect your energy. And then she started talking to me about Reiki, and I go, oh, that's interesting about Reiki. A bunch of, like, I've had 3 clients tell me in my sessions, my facial sessions, that I should start learning Reiki because I have healing hands, and that they always felt so much better afterwards. And I looked it up, and I delved into a lot of spiritual stuff, but I didn't really think that I could be a conduit to heal someone through my hands at the time. But
And
then,
just to be sure that people know who are listening, Reiki is like essentially the practitioner is the conduit of healing energy. Yeah?
yes, yeah. And I ended up, she gave me this woman. I took a Reiki class, and after the Reiki class, my friend brought me to this crystal store, and that's how I got into crystals as well. And I was reading all like the descriptions of what the crystals meant, right? And she's like, no, 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 no. The crystal chooses you. I was like, okay. So she's like, we're going to redo this. Now you just gravitate to the one that speaks to you. And at the time, it was a celestialite, which was what I needed because I always kind of had anxiety. It was meant for calming, getting you back into that meditative grounded state. And then the guy that was selling the crystals had all of these brass bowls behind him, and this customer beside me was like playing with one of them, and I just was so drawn to it. And so I had tried every single brass bowl, I think, that the guy had, to like find the one that was for me. And he didn't even tell me like what it did or anything, but I would sit there and play with that thing, and it literally made me feel different, right? So then fast forward, I moved to San Francisco, and I hadn't gotten a job yet. And I'm walking around, and I just like to go into churches because I think that they're beautiful. And so I went into um, the St. Cathedral Church in Russian Hill, and I walked in, and I just love looking at all the stained glass, and I don't know, there's just like this presence when you go into a church. And so I started talking to this lady, and she's like, oh, we do sound baths. And I was like, really? I have always wanted to go to one. She's like, let me see. And she's like, there's actually one tonight. And I was like, no way. So I went home, came back, and this guy had like, I don't know, probably 10 or 12 huge crystal bowls, and he played them while we walked the labyrinth in the church. And it was such a beautiful experience. So that's kind of how I got introduced to sound. But it wasn't until I moved to LA and my friend told me about this place in Joshua Tree in Landers called the Integratron. And because she knew I was in, that I was getting into sound healing. And she's like, I just had this crazy experience. And so I went with my boyfriend, husband now, and it's in the middle of nowhere in Landers, California, and it's a healing tabernacle that was built with 3 aquaphors on it. And this guy, George Van Tassel, built it because he said that he had these ETs come to him with this formula to build a healing tabernacle for humans to live longer and to upgrade basically and heal their DNA. And
Wow.
it's, yeah, it was fascinating. And so I had, like my first laying down sound bath experience, and he's talking about the history, and my husband was like kind of looking at me, and I was like, just don't listen to what he's saying. Just lay down. Just lay
Just, well,
down.
what's an ET?
Yeah,
For anyone that
it's
doesn't know,
like,
ET is extraterrestrial.
yes. You'll have to look this up, you guys. I'm not doing it justice, the background of the whole story behind it. So look up
I think we
the,
can put a link. I think we can put
yes.
a link in the show notes.
So
We'll find one.
definitely, it's one of the best sound baths still to this day that I've ever had. And that rings true. I
The first
actually,
time.
yeah. And I ended up going 6 more times after that. I just started bringing everyone there because of the experience that I had. I was seeing sacred geometry. I didn't know what sacred geometry was. And I started looking it up and like its meanings. And my friend from Minnesota was coming out to visit me, and she has kind of like led me on my spiritual path since high school. So I really wanted to take her to it. And I was like, well, they're not really doing sound baths, but they're doing this seminar, and it's about sonic geometry and math and sound. I don't really know what it's about, but we should go do it. you know
We're gonna go learn how to structure our
I
water.
was like, but I think but it says you get a sound bath. So, let's go. So we went, and then I started learning all about 432 frequency and how it's
the healing frequency.
Healing frequency of nature, and all of these correlations with nature and mathematics. And after that experience, I'm like, I'm going to become a sound healer.
You just knew it.
I just knew it. And I started buying, I got my crystal bowls, and I just started playing for friends and then bringing them into my Reiki and crystal healing sessions. But I wasn't confident enough at the time to really do a group session until I started taking my Kundalini training. That really grounded me into my body more than I've ever felt. And I think that's where, if you're someone that's always in your head or in the stars and has all these ideas, but they're just kind of floating up there, Kundalini for me is what dropped in and help me make these like dreams and ideas into the physical.
Embodied.
And embodied into the physical, because it really works on your first 3 chakras. And then after that, I got my training, and then I met you. And then I did my first Kundalini and sound workshop. I wanted to freaking die because I think it was like 33 people signed up, and it was my first one. And Kelly's like, you got this. You got this. And I just looked at her and was like, oh, just you giving me that like reassurance like helped me. And so yeah, now we're here having this conversation, and then now coming back kind of full circle, because when I first started, right before the pandemic, you guys were going to open up the Lotus Room, right? And then everything got shut down. So now you're reopening it right now, your grand opening. And so, wow, like full circle.
So full circle and incredible. And we are so blessed to have you coming on board and to be offering what you do once a week. And it's incredible. It's incredible that people get to experience the wealth of like information that you carry. And from your own personal dedication and devotion to your own life as a spiritual practice in its own right. And I just I couldn't be happier. It's so exciting. And I will really look forward to seeing how it continues to grow and evolve, because I'm sure it will, you know?
Yes, 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 yes. So excited. I'm actually so excited to do sound in the Lotus Room because it sounds so amazing. Like so
This room, like
incredible.
I'm in it right now, and like the acoustics, it was made for
Sound.
sound.
Yes. It's like a dome in itself.
It feels like that for
Mhm.
sure. So do you have anything that you would like to share, final thoughts, or anything on potential or future students, to listeners out there, on what to expect, or how to be prepared to come and take your class?
Yeah. If you come to my class, you want to get out of your comfort zone in a safe way. Because I feel like these different modalities that I'm teaching really encourage you to be vulnerable in a safe way. And, you know, it's taught me to be more vulnerable and even teaching it. So we're all in it together. And I really want to bring in more fun and healing, you know, because it's
Mm-hmm.
great to cry and it's great to release, but it's also great to put the fun back in it. And so I want to bring that, I'm going to bring that element too, where we're not taking ourselves so seriously. And also, Kundalini is a powerful yoga. So at the same time, be ready to change your consciousness. I feel like when you take this, it allows you to see the mirror in you of like what is no longer serving you. And sometimes that's not easy, right, to do as well. For me too, you know, when I was going through my practice and my training, and still today, it's like you see aspects of yourself that you don't necessarily like about yourself, but in return, like going to those places are is where the juice is, right, within going into those shadow aspects of yourself, to really transform and to, you know, become more of your authentic self.
Yeah, and I think there's a missed opportunity in spiritual circles, and in a lot of the yoga communities, of playing it a little too sensitive and wanting to heal and talk about shadow work and all these kinds of things, but to look at those parts of ourselves and to um, change. It's not easy. It's not always pretty, and it's definitely not exactly comfortable, because it's bringing into you into new territory. So I think that there is a really cool opportunity to be had here, you know, to allow yourself, like you said, in a constructive, you know, container where you're
Hmm.
holding the space and all that kind of stuff. So it's not like anyone needs to jump off a cliff or anything, you know, spiritually or physically, literally.
Yes.
I was just listening to a podcast on shadow work in general, and you know, someone was saying like people are trying to do that alone, but that doesn't make sense, because your shadow is what you can't see. And having, you know, like a Jungian analyst or someone be able to point out things that you can't see because they're trained to do so, that's one way. And in addition to that, I think sound is interesting. It's not like an embodied person who's pointing something out to you that's outside of yourself, saying, hey, like I see that, but it is something that is coming from outside of you into you, and touching on those places, like you were saying earlier, that you on your own, because we have blinders, because we have to survive, hello, to see. And I think that that's really, really beautiful. And so I think a lot of people talking about shadow work, healing, that kind of stuff, and then trying to do it like all alone in their journal. I don't know how possible that is, to be quite frank. And to come to only these classes that are like, be comfortable and don't do anything you don't want to do at all. I just don't know. I don't know how that facilitates growth. It could be a soft landing place. And if you need that, that's great. But I think it's cool that you provide something that's like, all right,
Let's
let's
do this.
go.
Let's do
Yeah.
it together. We're in it together. We're in it
Mhm.
together. Yes.
But shit's gonna get real. I love it. Where can our listeners and potential students, where can they find you and keep up with you?
So you can find me on my Instagram, Mariah Miller, EXP.
Super cool. And Mariah will be with us starting in June on Tuesdays at 7 p.m. in the Lotus Room. And I think we're still kind of working this stuff out, but with our new software that we use, like our booking system, it's cool because in the bio you can connect people's like Instagrams and Spotify's and like all that kind of stuff. So we'll
Oh,
make sure that
awesome.
I know, isn't that cool? We'll make sure that that all gets set up. But yeah, so I will definitely be a student. I will be in your classes, and I
Yes.
invite anyone else to join who wants to join. Let's do it. Let's
Yeah.
get weird.
Going up on a Tuesday.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, thank you so much. Many, many blessings to you, dear listeners, and to you, Mariah. Satnam. Namaste.
Satnam, thank you so much for having me.
Thanks again for listening in and joining our yoga community. If it so resonates, please share this episode with a friend. Remember, the inner light of awareness within me honors the inner light of awareness within you. Until next time, stay grounded, stay present, and keep flowing with grace.